Hey there, gentle people. In the last video, I kind of got cut off at the end, and I promised that I would get a little bit more into punch needle fabric and the different types of fabric that are suitable for this particular kind of needle craft. So that is what we're going to get into in this video. But just to recap, in the last video I spoke about the difference between embroidery and punch needle, and we also talked about the different kinds of needles as well. So again, this is just embroidery, and it's a sampler that I did with a couple different stitches. And if you notice on the back, because it's regular embroidery, there are not going to be any loops or anything like that, whereas with punch needle work, this is technically the front of the fabric, right? So, or the rug, because it's actually a rug hooking technique, but I love what a lot of people are doing in terms of making it a contemporary craft. So people have turned to using these as wall hangings, not just rugs, but you know, also doing other things like what I did here, which was actually to make a little handbag out of a punch needle piece that I did. But there's so many different things that you can do with it. You can keep it within this very functional contemporary craft perspective, or you know, you can do all kinds of different things. But anyway, so we're focusing on the punch needle today and the different types of fabric. When I started, I got this particular fabric, and this is what it looks like. I got this particular fabric on Amazon because initially I went to Joann's. They didn't know what I was talking about. They had no clue what monk's cloth was when I went there, and I couldn't find it in the store, so I ended up ordering this on Amazon. But when I first bought it, I thought that it might have been the wrong one, because I started watching these videos with this woman named Aruna. Her thing on Instagram is Boku, and she taught about having like 13, I think, holes per inch. And then when I measured this, I was like, that's not 13 holes. So I thought that this fabric wasn't going to work. I almost returned it, and I said, you know what, let me keep it just in case. And by the time I got the punch needle and started working with it, I realized that this fabric totally worked. Here's the deal with monk's cloth: it is not cheap, right? Punch needle is not a cheap craft because the needles are expensive and the fabric is expensive as well. So when you get it, you want it to go a long way. It's not something to waste or be frivolous with at all. The good thing though is that the yarns that you use, a lot of people talk about using 100% wool yarn, and that can get very pricey. I happen to have some wool yarn from a weaving kit that I had a long time ago, and I used some wool yarn on a different piece. But to save money, you can just use the acrylic yarn, super cheap stuff that you can get at any craft store, Joann's or Michael's or anywhere like that. So again, it's the fabric, and the needles are going to be a little bit more on the expensive side, but you know, you can kind of cut some costs as far as acrylic yarn is concerned. And if you want to go on to making pieces that you might want to use in terms of selling or for some fine art, fine craft type of stuff, then you can use wool. That is what I used here. This is all wool. These are the pieces of wool that I had from a weaving project I did a while back. So that is that. Here's the deal though. That same woman I was telling you about, Aruna, taught a class on Creative Bug, and there's a link on Creative Bug to fabric that you can get at Joann's, which is monk's cloth. This is the monk's cloth that comes from Joann's. I have it here as well. It's stiff. It's super stiff. Like, you can almost hear it going through sometimes. You don't have to worry about monk's cloth with holes in it though. Remember in the last video that I did, I showed you if you tried to shove it through either fabric or calico, cotton, it's just going to leave holes. But with monk's cloth, all you have to do to heal the fabric, you can even use your finger to kind of scratch it up a little bit. So what that means is you can remove all your yarn if there's something that you don't like and redo it, because pretty much monk's cloth is self-healing, right? You punch a hole in it and then boom, just like that, is pretty much gone. So that's the awesome thing about monk's cloth. But that ability to kind of contract once the fabric or the yarn I should say goes through, is what allows these loops to be held on the back, because you're actually working from this direction. So the direction that you're punching from looks more like embroidery, and what technically is the correct side is the side with the loops. All right, but again, the fabric from Joann's, what I noticed is that it's super stiff, right? And it felt a lot different from this fabric that I had gotten on Amazon. Here's another piece with the fabric I got from Amazon. Look how nicely the punch needle goes through. And in the last video, I also talked about the different types of hoops. You can't use these regular embroidery hoops for punch needle. You can save them for your pieces after and put them in here for display, but they're not going to hold the fabric taut enough for you, because what needs to happen, you need to have the fabric it needs to sound like a drum, and it needs to be really stiff. But what I noticed is, because this fabric is so flexible, it enabled me to use this plastic hoop. And these plastic hoops, you can get them for cheap at Michael's and Amazon as well. Use your 40% coupon. Those come in the mail pretty much every week. So just to kind of go over again, this is the fabric that I got from Amazon, and I'll make sure to put a link below when I get to it. And then this is the monk's cloth that I got from Joann. This monk's cloth from Joann's, actually, it comes in two different colors. It has this original unbleached color, and it has the white as well, and it will work. Here's the deal. When you go to Joann's, 9.99 times out of 10, they don't know what you're talking about. So you have to tell them to look in the utility fabric section, and that's where you'll find the monk's cloth. And you'll also be able to use coupons on the monk's cloth as well, because remember I said it is not cheap. But if you go where they have the embroidery stuff, you might also be able to find like a package of monk's cloth, I think from DMC, the same company that does embroidery, if I'm not mistaken. But it depends, and I think as this particular style of craft gets more popular, that they'll start to carry and have more options as far as monk's cloth is concerned. So again, with needle punching, you want to make sure you're using something like monk's cloth. A lot of people use rug backing material. Some people use burlap. The reason why I'm not too hot to trot for the burlap is because it breaks down after about 15 years. So if you want something that is going to last long after you're gone, that your grandchildren can look at or something, you want to make sure to use fabric that is going to maintain its integrity, because burlap will degrade. If you want to use it for practicing, fine, but otherwise stick to rug backing fabric, stick to monk's cloth, because that stuff will maintain its structural integrity. Something else that I discovered was actually like a year ago, I went to an estate sale, and the woman who had passed, she was really into crafting, but she was very much into embroidery, so and cross stitch. So I got a whole bunch of cross stitch fabric. Again, cross stitch fabric will not work with the punch needle because it's going to leave holes. I picked up these packages of Afghan. It didn't say monk's cloth on there, right? All it said was Afghan fabric, and I had no idea what I could use the Afghan fabric for, but I just I said, you know what? The man added it to my little stash at the estate sale. I'll just take it and carry it home. And then the other day I was like, maybe the Afghan fabric can work to do punch needle stuff. And let me tell you, this is my punch needle here. It totally worked, and I'm going to show you one of the pieces that I started on this particular Afghan fabric. Is this one here with Cardi B. I can't remember the name of the artist. I'll make sure to drop the original link in there too, but it was this really nice graphic influenced piece that came in the New York Times, which is where the idea for this came from. So this is the Afghan fabric. Here's the deal. It might not say monk's cloth, but apparently the Afghan fabric is monk's cloth, right? You might just say Afghan fabric on it. And you know, I know people will say, oh, use the monk's cloth. The regular monk's cloth can run kind of expensive, but what I found is that the Afghan fabric is a little bit cheaper And you know, like I said, if you put a hole through it, all you need to do is just kind of scratch at it, and that will bring it back to its original state. So you can start working on a design and pull it out. And just to kind of give you an idea, I'm going to thread this needle here. And again, this is the Amy Oxford needle. Definitely make sure to watch the first video I had put up on punch needles. And I also have an Amy Oxford unboxing video as well. So the little loop at the back is to make sure that the needle, the fiber stays in the needle and get it through the front. It's very important when you're threading your punch needle to make sure you have the fabric going in the right direction, which is super, well, not the fabric but the yarn, which is super easy with the Amy Oxford because it has this groove here, so you'll know exactly where you want to put it, but then make sure it's coming through the back. All right, so just to kind of show you, you might be a little bit concerned about these lines in the Afghan cloth, but I found that literally all I need to do is just go right over it. So here we go. And with the punch needle, you want to keep the needle as close to the surface as possible. And I just hold my needle like a pencil. Some people hold it like this, which to me, that feels kind of clumsy. That feels weird to me. So I found that the easiest way for me is to hold it like a pencil. And always make sure that the front of the needle is pointed in whatever direction you're going. And as you can see, when I get to this section where the line is in the Afghan fabric, I just kind of jump right over it. Right? So it works really well. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that, hold on, let me just grab it really quickly. When I started, I had like canvas frames that I had older paintings on, and I just kind of took the canvas off the older paintings. You can actually buy these stretcher bars and put them together, make the frames yourself. But if you have some old paintings that you're not using, you can just pretty much rip the canvas off. And the first time I didn't have any staples for my heavy duty stapler, so I just opened up a regular staple and got the fabric in, because again, what you want it to do is be drum tight in order for the needle to go through easily. This gets kind of tedious after a while, because when you're done, you have to remove the staples, and it's just kind of a pain to deal with. If you're fine with that, kudos to you. But if you want, you can get what is called a Morgan no slip frame, and this is what it looks like. I'll make sure to put a link below as well. Look how tight that is. You hear it? It's literally like a drum. The fabric is super tight in there. So this is awesome as well. And you know, a lot of people will tell you, oh, you can't use hoops because the hoops are not going to work. But again, you just have to make sure that you're using the right hoop. And you know, like I said, the Afghan fabric is cheaper than monk's cloth, but it works. I mean, it practically is monk's cloth, because I've seen it described as that as well. And you know, when you're putting your designs on here, a lot of people use permanent markers, and you can also use these what they're called water soluble disappearing ink, like you use for embroidery. Well, this one is kind of out because I've used it so much. But what happens is when you put the marks on here, like if you put water on there, it's going to go after a while, which doesn't matter with monk's cloth because the whole design is going to get covered up anyway. But here's the deal. If you're doing some designs where you're going to have maybe parts of the monk's cloth showing, or you're incorporating some different techniques in there, you might want to use the water soluble disappearing ink, because you'll be able to remove that easily with water when you're done. Another thing that I've done is, if you notice this little coaster thing here, right? What happened was I used acrylic yarn, and then I've seen some videos where people kind of steamed the wool just to kind of get the kinks out, and kind of, because the pieces kind of look like this when you're done with them. They kind of have a little curve, and if you want to flatten that out, you can steam it. The steaming only works with like 100% wool. It does not work with acrylic yarn, because if you notice, look how the texture on this piece right here, look how these loops are up and they're practically squished to oblivion here. This is the same yarn, but do not try to steam acrylic yarn. It's not going to work. It's just going to make your loops look really flat. But hey, if that's the look you're going for. And then what I did on the back was I put some heat and bond between these layers and put some fabric. So this is pretty much secure at this point. These loops are not coming out because the heat and bond works like a glue. And I ended up doing another one and actually making a necklace out of it, because I love making jewelry, so I wanted to see how I could incorporate that into the punch needle process as well. So again, you can use Afghan cloth, which is also referred to as monk's cloth. You can get it on Amazon as well, and you can also get it, like I got, you know, the pieces from Joann's. And the pieces from Joann's, you can buy them by the yard. Again, tell them to check in the utility fabric section. What I'm going to try is washing it to see if it makes it a little bit stiff, because pushing the punch needle through this is, once it's tight, it's like super hard and it's literally a pain to get it through. So if you're just starting and you don't want the frustration, just get yourself a piece of Afghan cloth, or you know, the stuff that is on Amazon. There are many different places where you can buy the monk's cloth, but again, it's expensive. So when you're starting a new craft, you want to keep your costs as low as possible. Then if it's something that you like, you can kind of move on and develop more and buy more expensive supplies after that. So that is the gist of it, people. Any questions, definitely leave them in the comments box below, and happy crafting. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your presence. You know I appreciate you. All right, peace.